Stop trying to reach God as though God were located elsewhere. That is the first thing. Don't allow the mind to rush out and up and away as if the presence were hiding behind the stars or waiting for you in a holier room than this one. When you say, "God, where are you?" notice what you just assumed. You assumed that God is over there, and at that instant you placed yourself over here, separate, two-ness, distance. Never forget that. The cry, "Where are you?" sounds devout, but it secretly writes a map with you on one side of a river and God on the other. And then you wonder why you feel the water, cold and wide, between. Now let me illustrate that. When you stop to think of your own seeking, isn't it always a movement of mind toward an object, toward a future moment, a better feeling, a higher state? You throw the net of thought further ahead. If I can just get there, then I will have found him. You picture a light, an experience, an improvement, and you lunge. But God is not an object of mind. God does not sit in the future. Spirit isn't a thing that can be seen, heard, tasted, touched, or smelled. The infinite cannot be grasped as one more improved sensation. The very faculty you employ, mental strain, has already carried you out of the only place contact is possible. Here. Again, see the mischief. The reaching itself manufactures the absence it tries to heal. You create distance with the first step, then call the distance my longing for God, and call the loneliness my humility. After enough years of it, you see so much of it that you know definitely. As soon as the mind frames God as elsewhere, the heart feels forsaken. And then the body, the pocketbook, the relations begin to echo that forsakenness. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Where the Spirit of the Lord isn't, where you have placed it out beyond your own being, there is mortality, there is search, there is weariness. Now, I am not scolding. I am pointing to a hinge. Change the hinge and the door swings differently. We are going to replace striving with a made simple, measurable practice of remembrance. Not mystical acrobatics, not intensity. Recognition. Acknowledgement. Practicing the presence of God. It isn't too difficult to sit for a few minutes in the morning and say, here, not there. Now, not later. The difficult thing begins an hour later. Will you remember again? Will you refuse the mind's panic that says, reach out, and instead quietly consent to, be still. The presence is here. This is our contract for the day and for the days to come. To catch ourselves in the act of projecting God away, to stop, and to replace that projection with remembrance. Today, and then again an hour later. And as we do, you will discover that the question, where are you, dissolves into the answer that was waiting where you stand. Now let us be very honest, very sober, because the human scene is not sentimental. When there is little or no conscious God contact, there appears sin, disease, lack, fear, grief, mortality in 100 disguises. Broken homes, broken bodies, frightened minds, overdrafts, lonely beds, and the slow ache that says, life is a search, and I am so tired of searching. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Where the Spirit of the Lord isn't, where it is not consciously realized, there is bondage. And don't try to perfume it. Bondage is bondage. It looks like addiction. It sounds like anxiety. It spends like poverty. It ages like despair. Now, when you stop to think of it, if God were in those conditions as their direct author, You would be in a horrible position of blaming God for your own ills. You would have to say, God gave me this cancer. God withheld from me rent money. God tore that child from my arms. And your heart would harden. Your prayer would sour. That cannot be. Never forget that. The discord does not announce an absent God. It announces an absent awareness. Our failure to contact, to recognize, to acknowledge the presence that is already the life of us. Again, let me illustrate that. Walk into a dark room at noon and you will stumble. You might say, the sun has failed. But no, the shades are drawn. The sun is not absent, in fact. The absence is in the room's exposure to it. So with God. Life itself is God. Omnipresence is not up for debate. The variable is not God presence, but God contact. As soon as a contact with God is established, harmony is restored. After enough years of it, you see so much of it that you know definitely. When, for a moment, the inner acknowledgement rises, fear loosens, a way opens, a body responds, a check arrives, a reconciliation that you yourself could never manufacture takes place. Not magic, presence. Not personal power, awareness. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Liberty from the compulsions of appetite and the dictates of panic. Liberty in the pocketbook. Liberty in the bloodstream. Liberty in the home. Where the Spirit of the Lord isn't, where we have let our recognition lapse, there is mortality. Sin that repeats, pains that rotate, thoughts that chase themselves like dogs after tails. Don't allow that to seduce you into the conclusion that God has left you. God has not left. We have forgotten to acknowledge Him in all our ways. The human sense of life feels like a long search, precisely because mind runs on its own fumes until it tires. And then it calls that tiredness my reality. But the moment we consciously turn, quietly, not strenuously, the search gives way to presence, and search conditions begin to dissolve. Our task, then, is to learn what establishes contact. Not the emotions, they can be noisy. Not the intellect, it is finite and cannot embrace infinity. Consciously, consistently, we must practice recognition, so that where we stand, liberty appears, because spirit is acknowledged as here. Now we come to the trap that makes the whole human search so wearying. The seeking itself is largely a mental strain, the finite mind reaching out to grasp what it imagines God to be. When you stop to think of it, what is that reaching? It is the mind building pictures, chasing words, manufacturing emotions, and then trying to clutch a result. But God is not a picture. God is not an emotion. Spirit cannot be seen, heard, tasted, touched, or smelled. The very senses by which the human mind gathers its proofs are the senses that cannot register infinity. And so the mind, having no instrument to take the measurement of spirit, declares, I do not find God, and then tries again with more pressure, more words, more will, and ends in the same futility. Paul very clearly states that the natural man receiveth not the things of God, for they are spiritually discerned. Never forget that. It requires a different faculty than the faculty of the human mind. The mind itself, being finite, cannot embrace infinity. This is not a criticism of mind. Mind is a fine instrument for its own realm of figures, forms, and functions. But it is the wrong instrument for God. Just as mathematics only begins to reveal its higher wonders when the mathematician moves into an intuitional sense that cannot be forced by rules alone, so spiritual contact is not achieved by rules or force. It is received by a quiet inner awareness, a faculty that hears without ears and knows without arguments. It isn't a reaching, it is a letting. The letting of the I within announce itself. Now, let me illustrate that. An educated man, brilliant, decorated, secure in his academic powers, receives a medical verdict stamped incurable. What does his mind do? It calculates. It compares statistics. It projects decline. It can read every journal, hold every conference, and yet, after enough months of it, you see so much of it that you know definitely the mind has come to the end of its own capacity. And because it cannot see beyond its own horizon, it calls the beyond nothing. It knows anatomy. It doesn't know life. Or take a businessman in a panic. The ledger, the market, the contracts. He can recount every fact, every reason for collapse. And still, he knows nothing of that presence that, in one moment of contact, can open a way that no amount of scheming could construct. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Where the Spirit of the Lord isn't, where there is only mind and its projections, there is bondage to prognosis, to precedent, to fear. Now we can understand this for a few minutes. Sitting here, it is not too difficult to nod and say, yes, of course. The mind cannot grasp God. The difficult thing begins an hour later. The mind goes right back to reaching, fixing, fearing. It pictures a problem and lunges for a solution. Don't allow that to run unchallenged. Catch it. Pause. Withdraw the grasping for an object. Withdraw from the demand to see, hear, taste, touch, or smell a proof, and quietly admit, I cannot reach the infinite. I can only consent to its presence. That consent is not strain. It is surrender of mental pressure. It is the soft inner acknowledgement, here, now, that lets the I of your own being be what it already is. And as often as you discover the mind lunging again, stop to think of this and begin again, not reaching, but receiving. Now we come to the hinge on which the whole door turns. The word I is closer to you than breathing. Before any thought of God, before any prayer is formed, before any doctrine is argued, there is I. The place you look from is the place you find. If you look out from a frightened sense of a separate person searching for a far-off deity, you will find distance. If you look from I, the life of your own being, you will find presence, because I is presence. When you stop to think of it, every scripture that has authority in your heart is only alive when it becomes inward. I and my Father are one is not a museum piece under glass, borrowed from an ancient teacher and left in history. Believe that it means I, the I of your own being. Life itself is God, and that life is the very animating principle by which you hear these words. Never forget that. Do not push that sentence away from yourself with reverence that becomes exile. Reverence it by letting it be true where you are. I and the source of my being are one. Now let me illustrate the difference between that I and the ego that says, I the body, I the mind, I the story. The ego gathers labels, age, history, wounds, triumphs, and then tries to live as if those labels were life. But notice, you are aware of those labels. You can witness thoughts. You can feel sensations. You can recall the story. Therefore, I stands prior. The I am is the living presence beneath the costume. The ego is only the costume, changing with every season. The I says, I have a body. I have a mind. I have a past. Therefore, I am not the body, not the mind, not the past. This is the beginning of restored dominion. Take this further. If I have a mind, then the mind is my instrument. Don't allow that instrument to announce itself as your master. You govern that mind. You may say to it, softly, be still. If I have a body, then I am not at the mercy of its reports in the way a slave is at the mercy of a master. I am responsible to care for it, to listen, but I do not surrender identity to it. The transition in spiritual life is precisely this reversal. From the belief that the body governs life to the realization that life governs the body. Test this where you sit. Without strain, without reaching, let the word I rise quietly within. Not I the anxious one, not I the achiever, just I. Watch what happens in that brief recognition. Does not fear loosen even a degree? Does not the frantic search pause, as if a hand were laid upon the heart? Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty, and this small liberty you feel is evidence, not imagination. After enough years of it, you see so much of it that you know definitely. Each time I am quietly aware of I, harmony begins to appear. Ideas come to guide, and the outer scene yields. The I am is not something you reach. It is the ground you stand on when you stop reaching. It is the presence you recognize as your very being. Begin to live from there. Look from there, and you will find there. Because the place you look from is the place you find. Now, having seen that the I am is the ground and not a distant object, we must be very clear about how that becomes real to us. At first, it is faith. It still is in the realm of faith. We accept, sometimes with trembling, sometimes with relief, that I am is within, that life itself is God, that I and my Father are one. Faith is not yet sight. It is trust, consent, a willingness to stop reaching and to acknowledge. When you stop to think of it, all discovery begins that way. Peary and Bird knew beyond all doubt, as they would have said, that a route existed, that pole or passage could be reached. But that knowing before arrival was not knowledge. It was conviction. Only when the sled met the ice where the compass said it must, only then did conviction become knowledge. So with spiritual life. After faith, if we persist in contact, come the evidences, what in modern language we call demonstrations. By this I do not mean magic tricks. Never forget that. These are the fruits that show contact has been established and maintained long enough to bear. A stillness arriving in the very hour when fear would normally rule. A guidance that does not sound like your old reasoning, yet proves itself wiser than your cleverness. A healing that touches mind and then body. A reconciliation that repairs what speech alone could not. Supply appearing where lack seemed fixed, not by scheming, but by a way opening you could not have planned. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. And these liberties, of nerve, of bloodstream, of relations, of livelihood, are evidences. After enough years of it, you see so much of it that you know definitely. Each time contact is made and held, harmony appears. As these evidences begin to pile up, our convictions deepen. The old panic weakens. The mind begins to learn its right place as instrument. And then, one bright day or one bright night, the very presence announces itself, not as emotion, not as argument, but as a quiet, unmistakable I within. Direct knowing. Not I believe, not I hope, but I know. The place you look from speaks for itself, and you rest. Out of that rest, life begins to arrange itself with an order you do not drive. Now, let me illustrate that progression in the way we live tomorrow morning. If you want evidence, you must stop reaching. Consent to presence, and then practice its remembrance with structure. It isn't too difficult to begin the day in recognition. The difficult thing begins an hour later. Will you remember again? Make this your method. Faith expressed as repeated contact. Contact verified by evidences. Evidences maturing into direct knowing. Acknowledge Him in all thy ways. At waking, an hour later, and again. And the root that was conviction only will become arrival. Now we make it practical at the point where habits are formed, at the start of the day. Devote the first 10 or 15 minutes, before the machinery of thought begins to grind, to conscious recognition. Not asking, not pleading, not outlining problems and preferred outcomes. Recognition. Practicing the presence. When you stop to think of it, the very first premise laid down in the morning becomes the foundation on which the whole structure of the day will be built. If the premise is absence, I must get God, I must get help, then the building will creak with strain. If the premise is presence, I am is here, the day rests on quiet ground. How do you do it? Simply. Sit. Be still. Close the door on the world for these minutes. Do not bring in names, faces, symptoms, balances, schedules. Don't allow that. You are not consulting the mind's cabinet this morning. You are acknowledging the life by which mind and cabinet even exist. Gently, without rhythm or force, let the inner word I rise. Softly. I. Not as a magic syllable to produce a result. Never forget that. Not as a technique to get health, supply, success. The moment you use I to get a thing, you have turned I into an object over there again, and the old search begins. Let I be what it is, the source, the presence, the life of your being announcing itself to itself. Now let me illustrate that. One person opens the eyes and instantly begins the day's negotiations. This pain must leave. That person must change. That bill must be paid. God, help me fix it. The mind rushes to the front and takes the throne. Another person opens the eyes, sits, and for 10 minutes refuses the bargaining altogether. The inner attention rests on I. Present. Here. One with the Father. Without argument, without psychology, something loosens. The identification shifts. Instead of I am this mind, there is I have a mind. Instead of I am this body, there is I have a body. Dominion begins to be restored at the root, not by whip or will, but by awareness establishing the premise. Life governs mind and body. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. And even in these minutes you will notice liberty in the breath, liberty in the pulse, liberty in the anxious narrative that used to own you. Guard this time. Don't allow petitions to sneak in wearing spiritual clothing. If a problem image intrudes, acknowledge it, let it pass, and return. I. 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 Not reaching, receiving. If words want to form, let them be words of acknowledgement only. Here am I. Thou art here. I and the Father are one. Then rest the words and be still in the fact. This is not escapism, it is foundation laying. From this premise, guidance appears in its own hour. Forms arrange themselves by a wisdom greater than your cleverness. At the end of those minutes, do not try to finish the day in that chair. Simply rise with the premise intact and go about your business. It isn't too difficult to begin the day in recognition. The difficult thing begins an hour later. Will you remember again? That is our next step, the hour later test by which we measure whether presence remains the premise or the mind has climbed back onto the throne. Now we take up that hour later test, because it isn't too difficult to have a fine 10 minutes in the morning. The difficult thing begins an hour later. The mind, having sat nicely in recognition, slips back onto the throne and resumes its old rule: calculating, defending, regretting, forecasting. Don't allow that to go unnoticed. This is where our practice becomes measurable. At first, make it hourly. Very simply, at the top of each hour, or as near as life permits, pause for 10 seconds, 15 at most, and acknowledge, I am. Not as a ritual to appease someone, but as recognition of presence. One soft inner turning. I, here, now. Then back to your work. When you stop to think of it, what are we interrupting with these brief acknowledgments? We are interrupting the habit of separation. The mind runs ahead into planning and calls it prudence. It runs back into regret and calls it honesty. It runs sideways into judgment and calls it discernment. It inflates into fear and calls it responsibility. Each move assumes a self apart, a God over there. And then the old search starts again inside the very hour in which you began with presence. Never forget that. By inserting these brief recognitions, you cut the momentum of separation at its root and return to the ground where contact is possible. Here. Now let me illustrate that. You are stopped at a red light. Instead of rehearsing what you wish you had said or will say, let the hand fall loose in your lap and for one breath say within, I and the Father are one. The light changes. You go on. The phone rings. Before your hello, pause, not 5 seconds, and acknowledge, here am I. Thou art here. Then speak. A message comes that would ordinarily jolt you. Before answering, look out the window, feel the breath, and remember, I. Before you eat, not as a form of grace to please a doctrine, but as actual contact, rest a moment in I. In the hallway, at the sink, in an elevator, waiting on hold, these are the places where the hourly practice hides in plain sight. 10 seconds, quietly, not dramatically, returning to I. This is not about collecting moments of inspiration. Your progress is not measured by how high you flew at 6 a.m. It is measured by how faithfully you remembered at 9, at 10, at 11:30. By how often you return. By how quickly you catch the mind in its outward rush and reclaim it as instrument. By the degree of success in remembering, you can measure the rate of your spiritual progress. Remembrance is the proof of contact. After enough years of it, you see so much of it that you know definitely. Where remembrance is frequent, fear shortens. Guidance appears in time. The body and affairs respond as if a clearer governance were present. Because it is. Where remembrance lapses, the old mortality reasserts itself. Panic stretches. Judgment hardens. Confusion breeds confusion. Do not condemn yourself if an hour is missed, or 3. The very moment you discover the gap, that discovery is your invitation. Begin again. Practice the presence of God. Acknowledge Him in all thy ways. Literally, in the way of the phone, the road, the inbox, the table, and He shall direct thy paths. It isn't too difficult to begin. The art is to begin again and again, until remembrance becomes the new habit, and presence the quiet premise under every hour. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Let these hourly recognitions restore that liberty, a few seconds at a time. Now we come to the fruit of this remembrance. Dominion. When you stop to think of it, you are aware of your thoughts. You can watch them come, you can watch them go. Therefore, you are not the stream of thinking. You are the one to whom mind reports. Never forget that. You have a mind. This mind is mine. You have a body. This body is mine. Instruments, not masters. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. And the first liberty you taste is the liberty from subjection to your own instrument. Don't allow the mind to frighten you with its storms. Witness it and quietly let it settle, as you might lay a hand upon the surface of water until the ripples fade. The mortal sense insists that the body governs life. Pulse dictates peace, symptom dictates truth, appetite dictates action. The spiritual sense knows that life governs the body, that the animating presence is primary, the flesh secondary. Now let me illustrate that. Fear strikes and the heart hammers. The mortal sense says, "See, my body has seized control. I must obey it." But touch I am, here, now, and notice what happens. The breath lengthens, the hammering softens, the thought stream loses authority. After enough years of it, you see so much of it that you know definitely. As soon as a contact with God is established, harmony begins to be restored, even in pulse and nerve and habit. We are not despising the body, we are restoring its place. I have a body to steward. It does not have me to rule. Again, see how striving reverses this order. When you reach for God with mental strain, the mind becomes the doer, the planner, the bargainer. It takes the throne, outlines the outcome, times the miracle, and then condemns you when its program fails. Don't allow that. Rest in I am, and the doer is presence. Acknowledge Him in all thy ways, and He shall direct thy paths. The moment you consent to I, rather than drive for result, ideas that are not of your anxious manufacture appear. Doors that you were pounding open from the outside swing from the inside. Right words form themselves without rehearsal. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Liberty from the compulsion to make it happen. Now apply this at the very point where habit feels strongest. Pain arises. Do not say, "I am in pain." Say, "Pain is reporting in sensation. I am I." Gently turn within. I, here, now. Fear arises. Not, "I am afraid," but, "Fear is appearing in my mind. I am I." Compulsion tugs. Food, drink, scroll, anger. Not, "I cannot help it," but, "A drive is moving in emotion. I am I." Then be still, not warring with it, not bargaining. just recognition, and a soft inner consent to presence. Watch the settling. From that settling, the next wise act appears. Rest, medicine, phone call, apology, or silence. But now as instrument-guided, not as slave-driven. Never forget that the mind is an instrument. It can forecast a weather report. It must not be permitted to prophesy your destiny. It can tally figures. Do not allow it to decree your future. Keep it in its rightful place with hourly remembrance. Seat yourself as I, and give the mind its tasks, the body its care, but refuse them the scepter. You were given dominion over the mind and over the body, because the life that you are is God expressing. I and my Father are one. Where that spirit is acknowledged, liberty returns, and the instruments serve their master. Now we must correct a very subtle error, because it wears the garments of reverence, and it feels so pious that it deceives even earnest hearts. The seeker's posture, as commonly practiced, often treats God as an object, something to be acquired, earned, or reached with better words, longer fasts, stricter vows. When you stop to think of it, the very grammar gives it away. I am here, God is there, and I will bridge the distance. That is separation. That is the human mind placing itself as subject and placing God as object. And the moment God becomes an object to reach, you have lost the living I am and settled for a concept. Never forget that. If God is an object, then the mind must reach, the emotions must strain, the will must push. The mechanism of idolatry is not only carved wood and stone, it is the mental image we fashion and then worship. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image. Do not imagine that command is only for sculptors. The graven image is the picture the mind carves and calls God. Anything you can see, hear, taste, touch, or smell is not God. Anything you can grasp as a thought form out there, distinct from the I that knows, is not God. It is a concept. And a concept has no life to heal, no breath to guide, no power to liberate. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Where there is only a concept, there is still mortality. Now let me illustrate that. Two people pray. One unloads a list of fears to a distant deity, urgent, sincere, sometimes poetic, and rises still tethered to the same anxious outline. The other person, having learned to distrust the object-making mind, grows quiet, withdraws the grasp, and attends inwardly. Not to capture a feeling, not to force a voice, simply to acknowledge, I, here. The first has prayed to an image. The second has consented to presence. After enough years of it, you see so much of it that you know definitely. The one who consents to presence finds that thought loosens, breath lengthens, guidance appears, and the outer scene yields. The one who pleads with an object grows tired and then bitter, because a concept cannot answer. Do not allow prayer to become letter writing to a far country. Prayer is not sending words, it is returning to listening. Be still and know that I am God. Not know about, know. This is not passivity. It is the only activity that touches the level where life governs mind and body. As long as you picture God somewhere, sometime, you postpone contact to a future and a distance. As soon as you acknowledge, I am, as the ground of your own being. Contact is now. This is the correction we must accept with humility. The very holiness we felt in striving was often the perfume of idolatry. The moment we stop fashioning an object and begin to recognize presence, dominion returns, and prayer becomes communion rather than commerce. In a moment, we shall move from explanation into the thing itself, not reaching, not pleading, only a few quiet breaths of inner attention, hearing, as if from within, the gentle rise of I. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Let us meet it where it is, within. Now, for a few moments, let us meditate. Not with strain, not with bargaining. Let us be still. Allow the shoulders to drop, the hands to rest, the breath to move on its own. We are not trying to get anywhere. We are only consenting to what already is. Contact is not achieved by intensity. It is recognized when the inner I is gently heard and trusted. Quietly now, within yourself, let the word I rise, softly, gently, not spoken aloud, heard, as if you were not making a sound, but hearing an I come up within you of its own accord. I. Again, I. Without rhythm, without effort. Do not try to make it mean something. Do not try to feel something. Let it be the simple acknowledgement of presence. I. Here. Now. Now, imagine, just for these minutes, that you are sitting way up here, above the mind's noise, as if you were seated at the top of your head, looking down kindly upon mind and body. See the mind as your instrument, thoughts moving like small clouds. See the body as your instrument, sensations appearing, disappearing. Say, without voice, this mind is mine. This body is mine. I am not inside their motion. I am witnessing from above it. I. Be very gentle. If a thought insists, let it pass, as if you were watching a leaf float by. You do not follow it. You do not fight it. You remain seated as I. Now, let the I deepen from personal notion to presence. Not I the successful, not I the wounded, but I as life itself, whole, complete, already. Let that be felt without trying to feel. A slight widening, a softening at the edges, the breath finding you instead of you finding breath. I. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Notice the small liberties arriving, a loosening in the brow, a quiet in the chest, a sense that you are carried more than carrying. As you rest here, let the inner hearing speak in the tender first person, as if the I were reassuring you from within. I will never leave thee, nor forsake thee. I go before thee to make the crooked places straight. Be not afraid. My peace I give unto you. Neither do I condemn thee. Lo, I am with you always. Hear these not as quotations you recall, but as presence addressing you, now, from the center of your own being. I. Here. Now. If the mind asks for a sign, do not allow it to drive. Return to hearing. I. If the body reports sensation, do not allow it to define you. Return to vantage. I above, mind and body beneath as instruments. If emotion swells, do not wrestle. Acknowledge, and again, I. Rest here a few breaths more. Nothing to reach, nothing to fix. Only the quiet recognition that I and the Father are one. This is contact. Simple, unforced, trustworthy. Carry this tone into the next hour. When the world tugs, remember how to sit up here, whispering within, I, and letting I be enough. Now we carry this into the very places where the old habit shouts the loudest. Arguments that flare before you know you've lit the match. A medical report that drops like a stone in the chest. The money pressure that presses behind the eyes. The loneliness that echoes in the late hours. The temptation that says, just this once. When you stop to think of it, this is exactly where seeking returns as panic. The mind rushes out there to fix, to plead, to bargain. Don't allow that. The very instant you feel the trigger, the heat in the face, the thud in the belly, the sentence loading on the tongue, that is the moment to stop. Stand still, not in paralysis, but in presence. Not running to God over there, but dropping into I am in here. Make it immediate and simple. One breath, a soft inner turn. I am. The presence is here. The mind is not my master. The body is not my identity. Then quiet. No argument, no justification, no rehearsal. Only the recognition. I, here, now. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. And the first liberty is the loosening of that reflex that would drive you outward. Now, let me illustrate that. The voice across the table hardens. You feel the reply rise, sharp, exact, guaranteed to win. Stop. Lower the shoulders a fraction. Inside, whisper. I am. The presence is here. The mind is not my master. The body is not my identity. Wait 5 seconds in the pause that used to feel impossible. Watch the current shift. Sometimes the right answer forms itself, and it is gentler than your cleverness. Sometimes the answer is silence, and it saves the hour. Harmony begins not by force, but because contact was touched. Again. The phone buzzes with results you feared. The heart kicks. Do not say, I am afraid. Say, fear is moving in my mind. I am I. Then, softly, I am. The presence is here. The mind is not my master. The body is not my identity. Breathe. You may still make the appointment, take the treatment, follow the counsel, but now as instrument-guided, not as slave-driven. After enough years of it, you see so much of it that you know definitely. As soon as contact with God is established, the vital quiet arrives, and the next wise act becomes plain. Money presses. The numbers do not meet. The mind runs to schemes or despair. Don't allow it. Stop. I am. The presence is here. From that stillness, a simple honesty appears. A call you had resisted, a skill you can offer, an expense to release without fear. Supply comes, often by a door you were not pounding. Loneliness prowls. The old remedy beckons, numbing, scrolling, reaching where there is no life. Halt. I am. The presence is here. Sit 10 breaths. The ache is witnessed until it loses tyranny. Then the real nourishment presents itself. A walk, a psalm, a true conversation. Rest. Do not expect fireworks. Expect quieting. From quieting, guidance. And from guidance, surprising harmonies. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Liberty in the bloodstream, in the sentence you choose, in the bill that is met by an unforeseen way. Each successful pivot is an evidence. Evidences pile up, convictions deepen, and one bright day, or one bright night, the presence announces itself unmistakably. Until then, let every trigger preach your sermon for you. Stop reaching outward and return inward to I am. Begin again and again and again until remembrance is swifter than reaction, and peace appears in the very places that once ruled you. Now we come to the closing of the day, because the way you lay your head determines the tone with which you will lift it. Don't allow the mind to tuck you in with a review of grievances, regrets, unfinished lists, and bargains with a God over there. When you stop to think of it, going to sleep searching is only postponing the same search to the first waking thought. End the day in contact, not commentary. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty, even in the night watches. And the day that ends in presence begins in presence. Make it simple. Sit on the edge of the bed or lie still on the pillow for 1 minute, 2 at most. Let the shoulders drop. Let the breath be natural. You are not drafting plans for tomorrow. You are not offering apologies to a deity at a distance. You are acknowledging, I, here, now. The same gentle hearing we practiced in the morning, the same consent at the top of the hour, we give as the final act of the day. I and the Father are one. Thank you, not as flattery, but as fact. Presence is. Rest a few breaths in that. Then a brief review, not longer than a minute, and not to condemn. Where did I remember today? Name it softly. Where did I forget? Name it once. Not to judge, but to measure. You will begin to see patterns. Ah, the 3 p.m. dip, or that voice on the phone, or the commute. Good. Now you know where to place your next hourly acknowledgement. It isn't too difficult to begin the day. The difficult thing begins an hour later, and again at night, when the mind would like to seize the reins before sleep. Don't allow that. By the degree of your success in remembering, not merely at dawn, but through the hours and here at night, you can measure the rate of your spiritual progress. Expect forgetting. Never forget that forgetting is not failure. It is the very doorway through which practice re-enters. The moment you notice, that moment is contact already beginning. Say within, even as drowsiness comes, I am. The presence is here. The mind is not my master. The body is not my identity. Then let go. No bargains with tomorrow. No rehearsal. Only recognition. Now let me illustrate that. One person scrolls the last 10 minutes, argues a silent case, tallies losses, and sinks into sleep under the government of the mind. They will wake tomorrow to resume the same government. Another person dims the light, turns inward for a minute, and hears, very gently, as if from the center of their own being, I will never leave thee, nor forsake thee. My peace I give unto you. I go before thee to make the crooked places straight. They sleep, not because all questions are answered, but because presence is acknowledged. After enough years of it, you see so much of it that you know definitely. Nights sealed in I yield mornings that start on I. And where that premise holds, harmony takes less time to appear. If you wake in the night, do not reach outward. Do the smallest thing, one breath, one I. No argument, no counting sheep, count on presence. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty, even from the tyranny of racing thought at 2 a.m. Let the word I come once or twice and return to rest. So the assignment stands, and it will carry you beyond tonight and into all your tomorrows. Morning recognition without bargaining. Hourly remembrance without drama. Before sleep acknowledgement without self-accusation. This replaces striving with living contact. Never forget that God is not to be reached. God is to be recognized as the I am of your own being. End the day in that acknowledgement, and you will not awaken to another search. You will awaken where you are, in presence. Thank you.